You ever get that gut feeling that petty nonsense is about to backfire spectacularly? That was me standing in front of what used to be my mailbox. Shattered wood. Twisted metal. Mail scattered in the ditch like confetti. Comment below which country you are watching from. Milton Craig was the HOA's self-appointed enforcer. Reflective vest. Radio clipped to his belt. Fake citations on a clipboard. He strutted around the subdivision like a small-town sheriff with way too much time and zero actual authority. He had made noise about my grass length and where I parked my truck. When my mailbox got clipped the first time, I thought it was a delivery truck and replaced the post. 2 weeks later, it happened again. Splintered post. Crushed metal. Neighbors whispered that Milton did not like me because I was one of the few people who questioned HOA rules. By the third time, I was done guessing. Mailboxes are legally protected under U.S. Code Title 18, Section 1705. Destroying one is a federal crime. I called the HOA president, and at the meeting Milton showed up and laughed and told the room that if I had built it right, it would not have fallen over. That was my first real clue. Milton's old pickup had a bent bumper and paint scratched in a way that matched the color of my mailbox post. I set up a wildlife camera near the road angled at the mailbox. The footage came in the following week. At 6:14 in the morning, Milton's dented pickup rolled slowly down my street, swerved just enough to clip the edge of the box, and drove off like nothing happened. Wood exploded. Letters flew. At the next HOA meeting, I stood up calmly, held up my phone, and said, "Here is Milton destroying my federal property." Karen, the actual HOA president, said the footage was not clear and that it could be anyone. I hit pause and zoomed to Milton's vanity plate. Clear as day. The room went silent. Milton sat there with his arms folded, smug. It was obvious the HOA was not going to hold him accountable, so I started thinking differently. I researched reinforced mailboxes. Under county code, a post could not exceed 4 inches in diameter and needed to be breakaway compliant. But there was room to be creative. I built a steel core post encased in decorative brick, hollow enough to meet standards, but solid enough to make a point. On top, I bolted a heavy-duty locking mailbox rated indestructible by the manufacturer. Neighbors watched me work and asked if I was upgrading. I said I was just making sure it held this time. From the outside, it looked like any other brick mailbox. Underneath it was a fortress. I did not have to wait long. A week later, I was sipping morning coffee when I heard it. The unmistakable thud of metal hitting brick, followed by a screech of tires and a man howling. I walked out slowly, coffee mug in hand. Milton's pickup was nose deep into my new mailbox. Hood crumpled. Airbags deployed. Steam rising. Milton was clutching his arm and swearing at the top of his lungs. I stood on my lawn sipping coffee and asked if he needed help. He screamed about what I had done to my mailbox. I told him I had built it to code and that I could not help it if he could not drive. Karen came running down the street in her robe and immediately announced this was entrapment, that she was reporting me to the HOA for creating unsafe conditions. I held up my phone, already recording the crumpled license plate and the mailbox still standing, and Milton's meltdown. Police arrived in 2 cruisers. One officer inspected the mailbox and asked if I had reinforced it illegally. I handed him the paperwork I had printed weeks earlier. County Code 14.08. Breakaway post. 4-inch diameter. Compliant in every way. Purchased from an approved manufacturer. I had double-checked with Public Works before I built it. The officer nodded and said it looked solid. Karen jabbed her finger at me and said the mailbox was a weapon and that I had targeted Milton. The second officer turned to her and said the only crime here was destruction of a federal mailbox under Title 18, Section 1705, and that driving into it was on her friend. Milton went pale. The officer told him the charge carried up to 3 years in prison, plus restitution. Karen's jaw dropped. The officers cuffed Milton right there on the street in front of the neighbors who had gathered with their phones out. Karen tried to protest and nobody listened. As the tow truck dragged away Milton's wrecked pickup, one of the officers handed me his card and said if the HOA gave me trouble to call him directly and that I had done everything by the book. I nodded. Funny thing about trying to bully your neighbors. Eventually, the law bites back harder than your bumper. Drop a like if this story hit different, and tell me in the comments what you would have built if you were the one replacing that mailbox for the fourth time.